To thank you for your appearance here this evening and to welcome you to the series of 5 lectures and discussions sponsored by the Center for African Studies and Education. We do plan a series, as I said, of lectures and discussions, which would mean then I see myself principally as a stimulus for your thought and a stimulus for our interaction one with the other. And hopefully we will together take a very deep look at the phenomenon that we call self-hatred and self-defeat, not just from an academic point of view, but from a self-confrontational point of view, from the point of view where we gain self-understanding as well as the understanding of our fellow man. The principal thrust of this series is not one where we just we intellectually exercise ourselves, but where we intend to take something from this series and turn it into something practical, real movement and turn it into the real empowerment of black people. If we do not convert what we discuss here today and talk about here today into something tangible, into something concrete, something institutional, into an increase into true power, then in a sense the purpose of this series would have been misguided and misfired. So the intention ultimately, despite the intellectual discussions we may get into, is that what we do here turns into something real and expresses itself into a concrete reality. I want to plug what we're trying to do here, since this may be the first time some of you have managed to visit our establishment here. This, of course, is called the Harlem Graphic Arts Center, and as you can see, we are principally concerned with printing, copying, stationery, typesetting, and typing service, as well as, of course, the projection of African culture. Our position here then is not one merely of a capitalist enterprise. We're here to demonstrate many things. My principal reason for being here as a business person is essentially political. To use this establishment as a political base at the very center of Harlem, and in a sense at the very center of Black America and of the African world, to indicate a number of things. First of all, to struggle against the continuing taking over of our community by other ethnic groups. And I want to say that straightforwardly. Each ethnic group, each nation of people has a right to protect its economic interests and has a right to see that its economic resources are used for the advancement of its own people and for the survival of its people. We see today, for instance, the United States is engaging in a major economics, very much engaged with Japan and other nations in trying to protect its economic interests. As a matter of fact, I think in a day or so, perhaps tomorrow or so, President Reagan will impose tariffs on today, is that correct? On Japan. You will see negotiations going on with Japan and other nations in terms of their trade relationships to this country. If you looked in, I believe it was this week's Business Week magazine, some of you might have had a chance to see it, you would have noticed that there were questions by the editors and writers in that magazine as to whether the United States would be able to compete with Japan and be able to survive economically in the future. South Korea is one of the fastest growing nations economically speaking. The East Asia region poses one of the greatest threats to the economic survival of this country. As I've often said in other contexts, we talk about being equal with the white man when we must recognize that the white man himself is in serious trouble. And being equal with white people is not going to get it. It's not going to cut it for us because these people themselves are trying to maintain their own survival. We have to recognize that we are going to have to be the equals or betters of any people, and that will include whites, Japanese, Asians, or what have you. Our competition in this world is not just against the white man and white people. It is against all people who threaten our survival as a race and as a group. And that threat is increasing. We can no longer hide behind the apron strings of the white man. And as he protects his own economic interests, he will by default protect ours. We can no longer rest secure in that kind of thought. In this kind of world with the economic threats the way they are, it's somewhat each man for himself. And we will have to be for ourselves as people. We cannot continue to give our resources up to other people and expect to survive as people. We cannot give our resources up to other people and expect our children to respect us and expect our children to hold us in high esteem. A week or so ago, I was making somewhat of a differentiation between what I call a pseudo-nationalistic individual or pseudo-nationalistic group and one that is more realistically nationalistic or is more truly nationalistic. And one of the criteria I used was the relationship of the group to its children. I think to a degree a pseudo-nationalistic group concerns itself almost exclusively with salvaging the hurt egos of adults. And you find a lot of adults salvaging their egos and concerning themselves with history, which is what they should concern themselves with. But we see a lot of adults whose heads are literally on backwards in the sense that they're continually facing the past and not looking to the future. When we were talking about Marcus Garvey, and one of the things that I think is apparent when you look at Marcus Garvey, not only is there concern with the past and the use of the past and the glorious past of black people to shore up the pride of black people, to indicate our capacity and genius as a people, but there is an equal concern with the present and with the future. Marcus Garvey was greatly concerned with the future of black people. It is not enough for us then to just worship the pyramids of our ancestors. We must leave some pyramids for our children. We must leave them a legacy. And one of the traits I think of the true nationalist is that he is concerned with children. They're concerned with children, and they're concerned about education of their children. They're concerned about the legacy, economic, social, political, and otherwise, that they will pass on to their children. They're not obsessed and compulsively concerned with the artifacts of their ancestors. While they respect them, while they study them, while they revere them, while they gain from them psychological, political, and social substance, they also are concerned about creating a world for their children. It is not enough then for them just to criticize Eurocentric education. They build an educational system for their children and see that the educational system works for them and their children. And this has to be done if we are concerned about our survival. How else is our survival assured other than the security and survival of our children assured? And that means then it has to be assured in terms of economic, social, political, and all of the other powers that are necessary for our survival. So I decided that I would not be one of the ones who just merely talked about what we ought to do and what we should be doing and what they are doing and how they are taking over, and not myself become a part of the struggle. This institution that we are establishing here then is in part concrete evidence of mine and others who have joined me efforts to concretely engage our enemies and to concretely engage in the construction of a legacy for our future and to concretely build our situation in such a way that we can use the resources of our people for the advancement of our people. We have every right to do so. Do not let some person arguing about reverse racism turn you away from the use of your own monies for your own benefit. You have the right to use your own money to your own benefit and to the advancement of black people. Black nationalism as an ideology has inbuilt into it the use of one's own resources for himself. The assimilationist ideology, however, is now being, in a sense, hoisted on its own petard. It's being caught in the horns of its own dilemma, thinking that the problem was merely that of racism, thinking that the problem was that of merely being accepted by another group of people, thinking that the problem was that of merely assimilating with other people. It failed then to concern itself with the economic, political development of black people. And it finds itself then, that is the assimilationist establishment, impotent before the takeover of its community by alien forces, because it finds that if it argues against the takeover by those forces, it will find itself in a contradiction. How can it argue against racism and then argue in terms of race for maintaining its own economic interests? Well, the black nationalists never quite had that dilemma to contend with. We have to argue in terms of ourselves and move in terms of ourselves as people. So we need your support here in terms of what we are trying to do. It is very important that we succeed here, not for me, not for any one of the individuals who has joined me in this endeavor, but for us as a people. The greatest political statement, one of the greatest political statements we can make here is that of succeeding. You can lecture for 2 hours on Saturdays and 4 hours on another day or whenever you want to. And you can do very erudite analyses of Eurocentric psychology and philosophy. And you can dig up the bones of Egyptians and do heavy work on that. But it does very little good when after you leave those lectures, you walk right out and see your major economic establishments controlled by other people. And you have to spend your money with other people. And those people use those monies to manipulate the world and to shape our very lives themselves. Our youth cannot believe in us in a deep sense when we talk black, and yet when they walk down these streets, they do not see blacks in control of themselves. They do not see us using the 30 billion or more dollars we have available to us right here in the New York City area when we are not using that money to our own benefit. We come across as hypocritical and insincere and cynical when we talk and talk and talk and yet do nothing. And it is the concrete expression of what we are and who we are that is the most influential aspect of our relationship to our children and to other people. Not what we say, but what we do, what we really are, how we really behave. And it is this kind of thing that we are trying to accomplish here, to demonstrate in a concrete sort of way what we say and what we talk about when we are lecturing and we are talking here. So we need then your support here. We are here to destroy several myths, and we're working hard. We still face problems, and we still, of course, have to deal with the legacy of our existence here in this country, but we're working on them daily. We are trying to destroy the myth of the black business person as being inefficient, and therefore we are working on our efficiency. We are not perfect, not at all, and I will not impress you that we are. We are still having organizational problems in development, but we're moving toward it because we know where we want to go. And we want to establish then that the black business person is not inefficient, he's not overpriced or she's not overpriced, that they cannot provide the services needed for the people, that black people cannot work together and come together as people and accomplish things. I will say in a personal way that when we opened this establishment, personally I was without a job, and essentially I still am. No monetary resources whatsoever, personally speaking. And yet, even at this point, as you look around you here now, there's been an investment of about $50,000 at this very point, without there essentially being a penny in my pocket. You see the machines over there in the back. We have a machine that's well, approaching some $15,000. We are planning another that will approach some $20,000. Believe it or not, these few books that we have up here, even as we grow, this amount still represents some five, six, seven, or $8,000 investment. As a matter of fact, initially it represented $10,000 investment, and you can see to fully stock it and to give it what we want it to be, to make it what we want it to be, would require $20,000, $30,000 or more. And we will stock it, and we will advance it. How was it done? It was done in terms of people who believed in our dreams, and people who believed in me, believed in themselves, and believed in black people as a whole. People who risked their life savings and their bits of incomes that they put away on trying to make something be real for us as a people. People who put away the mythology that we can't trust each other, that we cannot work together as people, and decided that they would take a chance. People who faced their fears and faced the possibility of losing what little money they had saved in an effort to do something for the advancement of our people. And this is what it represents. As you look around yourself here, you will see, of course, the African image. We intend, of course, to increase that image even more. We want to destroy the myth that in order for us to create wealth, we must deny our Africanness, that black power and green power are two different things. That is a very vicious sort of lie that gets around in this community. You'll hear some people say, well, I'm not for black power, I'm for green power, as if black power and green power are somehow unrelated one to the other. I don't hear Koreans talking about separating green power from Korean power, or the Japanese separating Japanese power from green power. As a matter of fact, it is their very Koreanness, if you want to say it that way, their very Japaneseness, their very Asianness, their very Europeanness that is the base and foundation of their economic power. It is the use of their ethnic identity that is the foundation of their economic, political, and social power, not the denial of their ethnicity, but the admittance of their ethnicity and the acting upon their ethnicity that is the basis for their economic power. Before one has economic power, one must have an ethnic identity, a national identity. An economic system is just not a system of money. It is a system of social relations between people. And money grows from the relationship that people establish one between the other. Money does not occur first. It is the relationship between people that creates and make money. Money is a social product. It is a creation of man and not a creator of man. And therefore, to establish an economic order, you must first establish a set of appropriate political, social relationships, one with the other, so that out of those relationships then can grow wealth and can grow power and political strength and can grow cohesiveness, political and otherwise. Neither of my friends and others who have worked with me in this enterprise was individually wealthy in any sort of way. But it was the combining of our wealth through our relationship as people that had helped to make it possible. But we alone cannot make it succeed. It will take all of us in relationship one to the other that will make it succeed, and that will make this a beachhead for the taking over of this community by black people. And I think this should be a deliberate, conscious goal. We should decide up front that we are going to take this community over, because this community is a valuable one, not only to the New York City area, but to the whole world of African people. What happens here in Harlem will spread out throughout the world. If we can make this an African city, if it can express our Africanness as a people, it will revolutionize the world of Africans the world over, ladies and gentlemen. If we can make it represent all that is decent and wonderful in African people, if we can bring to it law and order and cleanliness and a beauty relationship between people, then we would have started a major revolution in this world. Because Harlem still is, to a great extent, the cultural center of the African world. And we should not let this center be what it is today and misrepresent us the way it misrepresents us today. We should no longer permit it to be scandalized. I saw today in the New York Post someone referring to, what is it, the Wall Street is just like 125th Street. The idea that people are trading drugs. So 125th Street comes up. I know of some Negroes who are afraid to even come to 125th Street. The image of it is such. We've known too many writers and too many others who claim to represent us are too willing to degrade it. In their attempts to talk to the guilt mechanism of the whites, they are willing to trade the image of Harlem and black communities the world over and to destroy those communities. So I don't mean to go on about it, but I want you to understand very clearly then what we are trying to accomplish here. We are asking very much your support in accomplishing what we are perfectly capable of accomplishing here. We must recognize as people that the African American is in a very, very important position. Don't deceive yourself, some of you, that you're going back to Africa. Some of you will be going back. But some people use that expression to get out of their responsibility. I'm not going to I'm not going to do anything here. This is not my country. This is, doesn't belong to me. I'm going back to Africa. Of course, you hear those statements for about 15 to 20 years. They're still going to Africa 20 years later, having done nothing, having contributed very little. And we have some people who think that they are less capitalist when they work for white people than when they build their own businesses. So they point their ideological fingers at those of us who dare to go into business and think then and accuse us of engaging in capitalist exploitation while they creep down and work for the white man, somehow thinking that they are somehow purer than the rest of us who are trying to provide some services for our community, and for the rest of us who are trying to channel our money for the use of our community so that we can employ our own and so that we can ultimately make a Pan-African economic connection between ourselves and our brothers the world over. The economic activities of black people in this country is very, very important to the economic development of black people the world over. You see statuettes over there on that table. You see statuettes, you see masks and other things on this. When I sell those to this population, it is just not a profit for me, but it is a profit for the craftsmen who put those pieces together. It advances the economic development of African people in Africa, in the Caribbean, and in other places. I've also indicated that we must look at problems not only in terms of how we may escape from them. It's not only a matter of how we may escape from America, but how may we subject America to our influence as a people.
Tenement yard is not a simple task. Oh no, sometimes coffee, sometimes tea in the tenement yard. To survive down there, whoa, gambling was a man's only trade. Yeah, you see, some can't sign their name, although they still play the game. Down in the tenement yard, down in the tenement yard, yeah, whoa, yeah, down in the tenement yard, yeah. Down.
in terms of our relationships to Europe.
Dr. Amos leads a professional career that has now
In Africa at this being here in this system to focus so exclusively on one issue that we ignore other very important issues. This system, for instance, tries to get us to talk about problems that confront us as people and not consider the political, economic context in which these problems are generated. And often, though we are well-meaning, when we do this, we end up not solving the problems. So I'll beg your indulgence because I'm going to talk a bit about some things that may appear not to be directly related to special ed, but I think you will realize that they are. I want to start off by indicating that for the African in America, whether as slave or as so-called freedman, has always been subjected to a special education. And this is the thing that we have to recognize. We have to forget that this thing called special education is something special. There's nothing special about special education. Black people have been specially educated from day one. We've always been the subjects of a special education. So this thing that you call special education is special education within special education. It's just a subclass of the general special education to which we have been subjected as a people and to which we are now subjected as a people. This is no less the case, this being subjected to a special education today as it was in 1619 when we first set foot on this planet. And for the same essential reasons. That is, we are specially educated in this system for essentially the same reasons in 1993 as we were in 1619. I have told you often that there are certain things that remain constant despite all obvious changes. And it is very important that we as a people recognize the constants and not be deceived by apparent changes. We must recognize when the changes are engaged in order to maintain the constants, to keep the world the same. And many times, many of us are deceived by apparent changes, and we then lose sight of what is consistent in the world. I've talked then about what I call European constants, those intentionalities of Europeans that have been present since the 15th century, as far as we are concerned, are still present right here today and are expected by Europeans to be present into the foreseeable future. And no matter what has happened, these expectations have remained consistent. And if there have been changes, and drastic changes in terms of our relationships to Europeans, these constants have remained the same. And these changes have been engaged in to maintain them. Some of those constants you've heard me mention. One, of course, which is very important, which we see operating in Africa today, which we've seen operating in Panama, in Grenada, and which will operate in the future on the African continent and other places where African people are, is what we call the military differential. With Europeans who are 10% of the population, their continued dominance rests on their maintaining superior military force. In fact, to a great extent, our being over here today is the result of military differences. There is no intention for the Europeans to equalize that differential between Africans and themselves. That differential has been there since we met them, and it has really not changed up to this very moment. And we see it operating in Africa at this very moment.
And there is the intention that it will continue to operate in the world. Hidden behind this intentionality are a lot of glorious-looking things, such as non-proliferation treaties. The treaty that Bush just signed with Yeltsin, perpetrated in the name of peace, when it is nothing more than an intention to maintain European power by limiting the growth of military power on the part of non-European people. It has nothing to do with peace. It has to do with maintaining superiority and white supremacy in the world. So we must not be deceived by these games. To maintain the European, of course, has all intentions to maintain the economic differential. There is no intention for the European to see Africans as equally, economically equal with them, no matter what the talk is about. There is every intention for the European to continue to exploit African natural and human resources, no matter in what guise, even though he may appoint African so-called leaders and support African regimes. The intention is the same as it always has been, to maintain economic advantage of African people, to maintain the technological differential. These are constants. And we saw European technology as it was used against our ancestors. The intention is that it will be used in the future as it is used now. The Europeans intend to maintain the power of definition, which we'll talk about tonight. Because special education, as we will talk about shortly, is a definition. And as I said, I think earlier today, before we get involved in a discussion of special education, we should ask, why have we permitted the Europeans to define what it is? Why do they have the power to do so, and why do we submit to their definition of our behavior as a people? So before you get caught up in the intricacies of whether tests can differentiate between the learning disabled and the non-disabled, you should ask first questions first. Who determines it? And why are they able to impose their determination on us as a people? It is through then defining the world, as we will elaborate, that the European manipulates the world and maintains his power in it. And therefore he intends to maintain that power of definition. He intends to maintain control of the domain of discourse. A great deal of the discussion today over the various kinds of curricula, the multicultural curriculum, the curriculum of inclusion, the African-centered curriculum, and so forth, are struggles with the European over who will define what it is important to talk about. What shall be taught and what shall not be taught. What people shall learn and not learn. What educational experience shall people undergo and not undergo? Because all of these are related to power and to power relations. And therefore, if the European is intending to maintain power and control of the world, he must seek to maintain control over the domain of discourse, to decide what is worth talking about, to decide what is news, to decide the subject matter of curricula of various types. There are other areas, the area, of course, of always making those things African secondary to those things European. These constants were there from the beginning, they are here now, and there's every intention for them to remain in the future. Despite the elevation of blacks to high-level jobs, despite, some amounts of assimilationism, and despite some multiculturalism in the schools and so forth, these intentions remain the same. And it becomes very important for you to watch the changes and how they maintain these things. Because if you are to gain power in the world, it must be these very things which must be changed, ladies and gentlemen. The education of Africans has always revolved around education for servitude. That has not changed one whit. I have warned in Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children that the main purpose of education is not preparing black children for jobs. It is not preparing them to work for white folk. That is not the main purpose of the education of our children or our people. For if that is our main purpose, then it means another constant has remained in the world, and that's the constant of slavery under a different name. Now it's called looking for a job, with the same people having the jobs and the same people determining our wages. If you're talking about true change in the world, then you must educate yourself to create your own jobs and to employ yourself. But today, education for blacks, I don't care how high it is essentially still being defined in terms of servitude. And we think when we are educated in terms of how and where we will be employed by Europeans. That has to change. But the education of black people from 1619 right to this very moment has had this as a central tenet: training black folk to serve white folks' interest. Training black folk to be as productive as possible for Europeans, with the Europeans owning the means of production. Education that was separate and unequal. And believe me, I'm not an advocate of integrated education. Education that was ultimately and is ultimately degrading to black people has not changed. It was that way from the beginning, and is that way right now. Education that ultimately insults the history and culture of African people. Education that is Eurocentric, meaning an education that prepares black people to maintain European power as the central power in the world. Education of black people according to the white man's estimation of black intelligence and his need to shape and direct it. I've warned you before that you need to change the definition of intelligence before you get into an argument with Europeans as to whether their tests are measuring intelligence or not. You must ask, what is the political function of your definition of intelligence? What is the political economy of your definition of intelligence? And why is it that the way you define intelligence always ends up that means intelligent people work for you and your interest? So consequently then, we must recognize as an African people that the ultimate goal of intelligence must be that of preparing a people to solve their problems. The way intelligence is defined today and in America is such that if we as African people are said to behave intelligently, we are behaving in ways to perpetuate our oppression and to maintain European power over us. And therefore, it becomes important to the European to define what intelligence is and to define how it is measured, and for us to engage in futile arguments as to whether it's caused by cultural differences or genetic differences, when it really is not even the point. According to Henry Allen Bullock, author of A History of Negro Education in the South from 1619 to the present, in the beginning there was no thought of educating Negroes. Yet the necessity to do so was always present. You see, ultimately, the white man is faced with a dilemma. In his heart and way, he would not like to educate us but the very structure and demands and dynamics of his economic system in a way forces him to do so. And so even though he'd had no intentions, and you can see in the history books some overt statements about not educating blacks, and of course if you read the history of Frederick Douglass, you saw the issue there of the slave master and his reading abilities, what kind of problems they created. But in a sense, the white man's education of the African man under white supremacy has been very ambivalent, both intentional and non-intentional. Bullock goes on to say that soon after the establishment of the slave regime in the American South, there was set in motion unintentional processes destined to introduce the first of many educational opportunities that Negroes were to have prior to the Civil War. Because we must recognize that the plantation system and the slave system was what we call a rational system, in the sense that it was an organized economic system and operated according to definite goals and intentions. And another expression of rational business practice in terms of the slave system of the South appeared in the attempts of planters to utilize their labor efficiently, you see. So if you've got an economic system, whether that system is called slavery or not, ultimately you want to make it function efficiently to get the greatest bang for the buck. A complex system of division of slave labor was instituted on every plantation, and all of this was done in pursuit of maximum production per unit of slave labor. If you would read the magazines during this period, you will see great discussions as to how to maximize production on the plantation, how to relate to the slaves, how to train them, and how to motivate them so as to maximize profits. So within the broad limits of this rational system, he, the slave master, was expected to require and get absolute obedience, loyalty, docility, diligence, and other patterns of behavior considered essential for profitable production and survival of the slavery economy. Another constant that has not changed, has it? Not at all. For, ladies and gentlemen, this is the central essence of the education of African Americans today. To maximize what? Production for Europeans, and to establish in the African body absolute obedience, loyalty, docility, diligence, and other patterns of behavior considered essential for whom? For Africans themselves? No. Profitable for production and survival of the European economy. That's why we define ourselves in terms of our education as preparing to get jobs from Europeans. And how best to what? Qualify ourselves to fit in the European economy so that we can aid its efficiency. The laws of every slave state backed the normative line which he, the master, could draw, and every slave was expected to fear the consequences of any deviation from the range of tolerance his master set. And we shall see again, these rules that determine special education still have these things in mind, because these rules are rules that determine deviancy and non-deviancy. And their purpose is to correct deviant black behavior and bring it back in line with European economic and political intentions. And to create in our children personality orientations and behavioral orientations that are supportive of those intentions. These requirements, that is, set up by the European, set a rigorous sociocultural matrix within which young Negroes were to be socialized and were to become the personality types required by the rational order. And we are going to come back in a minute to what we call the political economy of the personality. and the political economy of normality, you see, because we are used to looking at normality as a psychological concept and a psychological state. No, ladies and gentlemen, normality essentially is a political and economic state, not a state of psychology. So however, we've been deceived, you see. But we'll get back to that in a minute. All the slaves could not be efficiently utilized as the rational system required unless they were trained in the ways the system by law itself prohibited it. In a sense, the system broke its own laws in order to increase its efficiency. And even though it might have had laws against teaching slaves to read, slaves still were taught to read. And teaching slaves other things, slaves learned many skills and so forth. Why? And in a sense then, slaves started their education on the job in America and received on-the-job training. They also were hired out in other professions where they earned monies for their masters and brought the money back. With all due respect to Malcolm X, there were greater divisions than field hands and house servants. There were deep hierarchies of slaves with numbers of skills and so forth. The slaves not only worked in the house, or not only worked in the fields, but they worked throughout the Southern economy. They were millwrights and carpenters and blacksmiths and shipbuilders and all other kinds of things you could name. You recognize that in many areas of the South, after the emancipation, there were more skilled black laborers than there were white laborers as a result of their training on the plantations. And that is a whole nother story. And it's amusing today to see people talk about black people as unskilled, as if our lack of skills were here since we started. That was not the case. We had to be de-skilled as a people in this country. And those skills began right on the plantation. We were hired out. In a sense, then, the plantation was the first training school for African people. And to a great degree, the slave masters recognized, as they do today, that a trained slave could sell for more on the marketplace. And therefore, when you went on the auction block, the more skills you had, the more he could fetch for you. In fact, some of the skills were developed as an investment so that when the slave was sold, he would bring more than was invested in it. Sounds like today, ladies and gentlemen? Sounds like this kind of thing when we are told and we tell our children to build your marketable skills so that when you go on the auction block in front of your white employers, you can demand a higher price because you can project the skills that he has set in you. What do the French tell us? The more things change, the more they remain the same. And this capacity we must maintain, or else we will be deceived by superficial changes, as so many of our people are. Some of you heard me on the radio this morning. You heard some references to Colin Powell as representing some advancement for African people. And yet those of us who have a little knowledge of African history and of the history of the Byzantine Empire know very clearly that there were slave generals. Yes, generals who led massive armies who were slaves. And despite the fact that they were generals and led empirical armies, they were slaves just the same. So the idea then that you're going to have an African man under the power of European and white supremacy being a general, that he represents some kind of power and advancement for black people is a delusion. And I'm certain, if you read people even like Chancellor Williams, and God bless his soul and rest his soul, who talks about those Africanized Arabs also leading those armies against whom? Other Africans. So let's not get carried away about black man being ahead of the U.S. Armed Forces, ladies and gentlemen. Because essentially he's going to play the same role that we've always played when we were promoted to these second-hand positions. That is leading aggression against our own people. Let's look a minute at the political economy of the personality. You see, before we talk about personality as a psychological entity, ask yourself the question, what is its political and economic function? You see, we get a lot of people get caught up about normality and abnormality and trying to define what is normal and what is not normal. Before you get caught up in asking that question, ask yourself, what is the social function and the political function of normality? You see? In other words, then, the personality, to a great extent, is a political creation and a social creation. So is normality. That is why they are defined differently by different cultures. And that is why what is called normal in one may be perceived as abnormal in the other. And therefore, to a great extent, what is normal and what is abnormal are the results of the interaction of social power and social forces within a society. The personality and abnormality are the results, to a great extent, of the systematic use of reward and punishment on the bodies of people. Threat and intimidation, control of information, control of interaction and social interaction in such a way that over time, people tend, as a result of social conditioning, to behave in particular ways. And often then, those who define what is normal and what is the normal and what is the normal personality are those in power. And their definition of personality and normality involves then the conditioning of people in such a way that in relating one to the other, in those people perceiving themselves in particular ways, in perceiving the world in particular ways, they maintain a social and economic system. They respond to particular authorities and particular types of stimulation and specific types of signals. Am I making myself clear? And therefore, all of what's involved in special education as an indication of deviant personality or as an indication of them abnormality ultimately is built and structured right into the political and economic system of this world. And we must keep this in mind before we just fall for the okey-doke and take what somebody else describes as normal. Ladies and gentlemen, to be a normal black man and woman under white supremacy, according to white definition, is to be sick, according to African definition. Yes. Personality and normality involves a particular organization of the person's ways of thinking, the organization of a person's ways of behaving, of seeing the world, of seeing himself, of looking at the world and relating to people in that world. More deeply, it is an organization of people's tastes and interests and desires. And if you look closely at it then, normal people in a particular society will be interested in those things that maintain that society, will have desires which, if satisfied, maintains the power relations in that society. Am I making myself clear here? Okay? They will be interested in things that maintain power relations. They will define themselves in ways that maintain power relations. The way some black men define themselves today as skirt chasers, as beer drinkers, looking at a TV set, watching men run into each other and fall down. That's a man. Keeping up and being solely obsessed by women, solely obsessed, as we say, with playing with balls. Yes. Drinking themselves into a stupor, looking at people run and bang into each other and get up and run again. Not reading, not studying war, not developing economic power, not developing military power, not learning how to relate and associate with other men and women to form an organization that will be an expression of African power and to liberate African people. That somehow has been made to be perceived by many of our young men and women today as to be engaged in feminine or less than manly activities. And the society is willing to pay black males millions of dollars to maintain those interests. That's why I have told you in other contexts that man has little to do with your penis or your testicles. What is a man has a social definition. It is a political definition. The definition of what is a man must be ultimately connected to the needs of the society itself, so that a man in acting out his manhood is maintaining his social group. If man is not defined, and what it means to be a man is not defined socially and in terms of his social group, then he will not be social, but antisocial. And one of the major reasons then our males are attacking our own societies and communities today is because they have not correctly defined what it means to be a man. A normal African man would not kill another man in order to take the money he rifles from his pocket to a white man and give it to him and make him rich so that he can rule over him further. Not normality. In fact, you don't even have to go that far. A normal man, black man, doesn't work day and night only to give his money to a white man. You have to be abnormal. But of course, the white man has to make you feel that that is what? Normal. And that is the American way. And you're doing what you want to do, and nobody else can tell you how to spend your money. You are now expressing American individualism. And what it means to be free. Isn't it strange? And watch it, ladies and gentlemen, every means by which the normal African American defines his freedom ends up supporting white folk. To prove that he can live anywhere he wants to, he's got to move into a white neighborhood. To prove that he's free to go to any school he wants to, he goes to a white school. To prove that he can spend his money anywhere he wants to because he's a free man, he spends it with white folk. You understand? Yeah. White man feels as free as a bird and feels no compulsion to live among you and does not feel that his freedom is infringed upon at all. Doesn't feel any compulsion to go to school with black folk. He doesn't feel like he's unfree because he's not going to school with you. He doesn't feel as he's unfree because he's not spending money with you, because he's not laying in the bed with you, and all these other kinds of things. But the Negro, in order to feel free and express his freedom, must spend and give his money and his labor power and everything else to everyone else but himself. That establishes him as a free individual and a normal individual. So then normality, you see, ladies and gentlemen, more than a psychological function, is a political and economic function. Because as you express your normality, as you express your law-abidingness, you maintain a system. Yeah. You heard me talk about this morning. Our respect for the law, as if it represents something holy and above all people. The law is nothing but a bunch of rules laid down by one gang of people who have the power to enforce it on another gang. Understand? Nothing sacred about it. And it's passed and ratified to protect group interests, one set of group interests against what? Another set of group interests. That's all it's about. Nothing sacred about it. But you see, if you see law and law-abidingness as indicative of pro-social behavior and indicative of normality, then by obeying that law and looking at law that way, you will have to do what? Maintain the people who passed the law in what? In power. It was until Martin Luther King and others decided that they would do what? Break the law. Okay? Break the law. Be what? Abnormal. That the power relations and the social relations of America began to tumble down. So you have to be careful, you see, how you define yourself. A.R. Luria argues in his book, Cognitive Development, Its Cultural and Social Foundations, and I recommend this highly to those of you who are in education, A.R. Luria, because it demonstrates so very clearly how the mentality of people are shaped very much by the type of social activities they are allowed to engage in, by the type of social and political structure they are conditioned in as a people. The science of psychology has avoided the idea that many mental processes are social and historical in origin. Mental processes just don't flow from the brain as a natural effluvia. Mental processes are historical effects and are related to historical experiences, or that important manifestations of human consciousness have been directly shaped by the basic practices of human activity and the actual forms of culture. We have to recognize this, and we don't have time to go into this evening. When the new publication in a few months comes out, Educating Black Children for the 21st Century, we will find in there detailed what is being stated here, of how the mentality and consciousness of our people is very directly related to the experience of our people in America, and how teachers, what you call concrete thinking in African children in these schools, is directly related to the fact that African people were brought over here not to think, not plan, not to conceptualize, not to control, but to work and to do what? Concrete things. And the whole thrust of the American experience is to seek to shape the thinking styles of African people to fit the role that white people made for them. And therefore, if the roles of African people was to be that of practical workers, concrete workers, then it was in the interest of Europeans to make their mentality concrete and practical rather than conceptual and abstract. But you see, if you don't know this history, And if you don't know the dynamics of how this mentality has been created, and if you don't know the political economy of thought, then when these children come into your schools and they demonstrate what you call concrete thinking, lack of planning, and lack of conceptual thought, you are ready then to label them as learning disabled and relate to them in terms of being learning disabled. I'll be back to that in a minute. The manifestations of African consciousness is directly shaped or influenced by the social political practices and forms of American culture, shaped by the social power relations of white and black people. You know that if we had a different power relationship with white folk, we wouldn't think and behave the way we do now. No, we would act differently and behave differently. To a great extent then, the things we talk about, the things we're interested in, the way we look at ourselves, and all of these kinds of things are a product of the nature of the power relations that have adhered between us and white folk. Imagine how you would be if we were the more powerful ones. In fact, we wouldn't be having this lecture tonight. It wouldn't even be a subject matter. We'd be talking about how we could keep it and how we could protect what? African interests. Right now, we have to talk about how we're going to take it. These relations, these power relations have and are guided by social and legal definitions and rules and their enforcement by whites. These definitions and rules provide standards and ways of judging others as deviants or non-deviants, of transforming an instance of conduct into a deviant or non-deviant act. I want you to keep in mind what I'm talking about in terms of rules, you see, and definitions, because it's what is defined as learning disabled, you see. What is defined as in being in need of special education. And that definition being based on the exhibition of certain types of behavior, and then stigmatizing people based on this behavior. Even though when you get to really look at it, ladies and gentlemen, the behavior is not deviant or non-deviant. These definitions and rules serve a dual function. They provide for the labeling of others and supply the means and the authority to stigmatize the behavior of others. You will recognize as we go on then that when you permit others to label behavior and your own behavior, you are giving them a power over you. And it will be that label which will authorize them to do certain things to you and about you. So they are not just labels, but they are the justifiers of behavior. And they prescribe various behaviors toward those who are labeled. Consequently, definitions and rules are expressions of group, conflict, and interest. I want you to keep that in mind. Labels are not just labels of behavior. Labels are entered into as a part of the interaction between groups. I don't want you to do this, therefore I will make it against the law. And when you do it, I shall call you a criminal. You see? And so, what do we have here? And why am I making this law? And why am I calling you a criminal? So that I can protect what? My interest. You see? And can justify myself in treating you in a particular way so that my interests can be protected. And the formulation, this formulation of rules and definitions translate into power to impose one group's will on the other, the power to define and enforce one group's definition on the other's conduct. And this is what this is about. If you look back in your old Bible there, you will see that Adam is symbolically given the power to dominate the earth by God, by the fact that God permits him to do what? Name all the animals, the fish and the fowl, and to name the earth itself. That is a power. And this is a symbol. By saying this, he is saying, you are the one who dominates the world, because I'm going to permit you to define the world, to name it, and to relate to it in terms of the way you define it and name it. This then will give you the right to impose yourself on nature and to impose yourself on the world. Consequently, when you let another people have the right to define your behavior, you let them also have the right to impose themselves on you. And it's amazing what happens when you have definition. You talk about, some of you are familiar with the book Regulating the Poor. It's interesting how so-called normal behavior can in an instant be turned into abnormal behavior by the mere act of labeling. How, for instance, some of you may have gone to Boston, you heard something called the Common Gardens, or the Boston Common Gardens, a park, which harks back to a European tradition where certain lands belong to all of the people. And the peasants then had the right to hunt on those lands, to fish, to find their firewood, to do various things, to graze their cattle and so forth as a means of supporting themselves. They had that right. And this right was sanctioned by tradition over hundreds and hundreds of years. But something happened. The price of wool started increasing tremendously and became very profitable. And those who were in power decided then that they wanted as much land as possible. And they went to the British Parliament to get a law passed so that they could enclose what was once common property and fence it off and make this property private. And therefore, overnight now, those people who had been bringing their cattle and doing these things in their normal way were turned into what? Criminals. Criminals. Why? Because their behavior was different? Because they were emitting criminal behavior? No, because the rules had changed. Right overnight, now they became criminals. And as the price of wool went up, and as the English economy changed, when these landowners no longer needed the peasants on the land, and when they needed them in the developing factories, they literally turned them out into the highways and the byways. And overnight, they became beggars. But also overnight, it became against the law to beg without a license. And overnight, it was all right then to, if you didn't have a license, to be beaten until the blood ran. And overnight then, it became possible to talk about the personality of the beggar. And to see the beggar as having a criminal personality, no doubt built into his genes. Yeah, the same kind of game that we have today. A group of people interested in their profits and interested in maintaining power and control passed laws, and overnight then the behavior of our peoples suddenly become what? Criminal and abnormal. And now the same behavior that they were exhibiting before the laws were called become indicative of criminal personalities and of illness and abnormality. Let's wake up. And notice then that the labeling and defining of behavior, again, not essentially and only a psychological process, but it is a psycho-political, psychoeconomic process. As a matter of fact, I will give you a short publication to read shortly called The Psychoeconomics of Black-on-Black Violence. You thought I was through with it, didn't you?
Let them say what they want to say. Let them talk, let them talk. Jah will make a brighter day. Let them talk, let them talk. Let them say what they want to say. Let them talk, let them talk. Jah will make a brighter day. You tell them the truth, but still they don't believe you. You show them what is real, still they say what they feel. Hypocrites and parasites, I'm talking about the scorpions of the earth. We are the sufferers of the earth. To them not to the onward, yeah. Let them talk, let them talk. Let them say what they want to say. Let them talk, let them talk. Jah will make a brighter day. Let them talk, let them talk. Let them say what they want to say. Let them talk, let them talk. Jah will make a brighter day. You live and let them be, but still they talk of you falsely. Try to establish the peace, but in war they increase. Stand aside, bless the children of Jah, and watch the wonders of the Lord. Jah know. Let them say what they wanna say. Let the heathen talk. Let the heathen talk. Jah will make a brighter day. Let them talk. Let them talk. Let them say what they wanna say. What they wanna say. Let the heathen talk. Let them talk. Jah let them talk. Gotta let them talk. Let them speak the abundance of their heart. And then let them set the jar. Every word that proceeded from their mouth. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord. Jah know. Hypocrites and parasites. I'm talking about the scorpions of the earth, yeah. Fight war with the Eden no more. For in fire shall they burn, Jah. Let them talk, let them talk, let them talk. Let them say what they wanna say.
Let them keep talking. Whoa, bark if you're barking. Oh yes, let them talk, keep them talking. Hey, we're gonna keep them talking, laugh when they're talking, yeah. We've got a lot more coming, talk, keep them talking. We're gonna keep them talking, laugh when they're talking, yeah. We've got a lot more coming. Who have ears to hear, let them hear. And who have eyes to see, let them see. No one in this world can stop me, 'cause I'm protected by the Almighty. Jah is with me wherever I go. Oh, I know Jah loves me so. One thing I know, and of that I'm sure. I'm gonna talk, keep them talking. We're gonna keep them talking, laugh when they're talking, oh yes. We've got a lot more coming, talk, keep them talking, and I know we're gonna keep them talking.
All we need is love. 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 Why are we so blind? Because we ain't got no vision. Why are we so gullible? Don't make our own decisions. Why are we so dunce? Even though we're educated. Why are we so horrible? Why? It's unbearable. Why are we so selfish? Obviously we don't care. Why are we so critical? Sometimes it makes me scared. Why are we so weak? Always selling ourselves cheap. Why are we so contrary? This world gets really scary. Why are we so cruel? Man, life don't value jewel. Why are we so judgmental? Always making assumptions. Why are we so distant? But still worship the same God. Why are we so ungrateful? It's painful how some not faithful. Why are we so disconnect? I just can't understand it. Why are we so corrupt? This really makes me panic. Why are we so toxic? Why are we so toxic? Why are we so toxic? Why mankind so toxic? Why? Down in the table jar. Down in the table jar. Down in the table jar.
tenement yard is not a simple task. Oh no, sometimes coffee, sometimes tea in the tenement yard. To survive down there, whoa, gambling was a man's only trade. Yeah, you see, some can't sign their name, although they still play the game. Down in the tenement yard, down in the tenement yard, yeah, whoa, yeah. Down in the tenement yard, yeah, whoa. Down in the tenement yard, yeah. You can't believe it, yeah, whoa. Right against your worst enemy, yeah. Although they say every day, whoa, love your neighbor as you love yourself, yes. They do fight sometimes by the cistern where we all go, yeah, to fetch water down in the tenement yard. Down in the tenement yard, yeah, whoa, yeah. Down in the tenement yard, yeah, whoa. Down in the tenement yard. Ooh, well, down in the tenement yard. Mama said be good time. Ooh, well, down in the tenement yard. Down in the tenement yard, yeah, whoa, yeah. Down in the tenement yard. Down in the tenement yard, yes, whoa. I said you can't believe it, yes, whoa. Right against your worst enemy, yeah. Down in the tenement yard. Down in the tenement yard, yeah, whoa, yeah. Down in the tenement yard, yeah, whoa, yeah. Down in the tenement yard. We used to gamble in the tenement yard, yeah. Under the mango tree, yeah, whoa, yeah.
So far away from your homeland, Ethiopia, Ethiopia, Mama Africa, cradle of civilization. Overstand me no man, overstand me no man. Africa, Africa, little, 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 yeah. Number one, yeah. Africa, Africa, little, 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 yeah. Number one. So no need to be dismayed. That's how we come, that's how we go. One way in, one way out. This I know, Selassie say so. Like a leopard never changes spot. So is I and I, Ethiopia, no man abroad. And we taking charge. Oh, yeah. So size up, wise up, children. Got no time to live and die in another man den. Whoa, we got our own piece of land, fruitful from then. Still is and will always be forever. Remember, when the hardest seas get too much, whoa, yeah, and the journey of the west seems hard to bear. Remember where you all come from.
Africa, Africa. Yeah, number one. Yeah, Africa, Africa. Yeah, number one. Yet some got love for the street, but the street don't got no love for them. All that remain is Babylon remnants. Ooh yeah. Fear not their time and machine. Keep on moving, we're more than glitter and glamour. We are royal lights, gold and green. Like mother and child, Africa awaits our creator. Loved ones of sovereignty, children of the royal essence like you and me. As far as the east is from the west, keep your good meditation of our kingdom and manifestation. Address and release all your burden and stress. Whoa, yes. For when the odysseys get too much, whoa, yeah. And the journey of the west seems hard to bear. Remember where it's all begun. Africa, Africa, yeah, oh, oh. Yeah, oh. Africa, Africa. Cradle of civilization. Overstand me no man, overstand me no man.
Yes, greetings, good night. We're there with you. I will come in on the late shift. But as Mama was saying, I better late than never. So we will continue the lecture series on Thursday, God willing. And we will look at where we have advanced and the journey that still lies ahead and what we've achieved from through the light of Elijah Muhammad, the early days. The early days of Elijah Muhammad, what we have learned, what we were pursuing, and what we have gathered and made good use of. So we will continue and finish them off, both lectures, God willing, on Thursday. We also want to keep, look on the dictionary now, because in this time it would appear that we need to understand the definitions. Those of us who haven't been really caught up in that, we should just give ourselves some time, take some time and look at definitions of the English language and its conceptual meanings, definitions. It's very important because the way a lot of our people them who have jobs in the media, they were put on the spot or them decide that they are going to show that they are with the power brokers. Them call we brethren, idiot and all kind of things. And it's all to do with a group of people wanting to subject him to mental abuse. as in demonstrating the authority that them have. So we are saying, when you got Amazon, it's Amazon always market the book for years. And it's been charted. So me know who I send some information or link of the book with reference to the film or the documentary. I've been made a media victim. But it's bigger than this, you know. It's called censorship, but it's also demonstrating how much authority, how much power they have on African people, most influential African people in the diasporas, personalities in the diaspora. So you see, when me, personally, myself knows, keep reminding people that playing amusement is not our thing. You understand? Playing amusement. Other sponsors that tell us that this life is not be a playing amusement. So we are athletes, we're comedians, we're all kind of things for other than ourselves. But when they find that we have some kind of influence, some of us, and they're saying that we will use that for the global population without their consent, and that's what they want. You understand? This is servitude, slavery at work, you know. They take stance. So, Semitic and anti-Semitic, go get your dictionaries. And those of you who don't understand its definition and you're African, then there's a problem. There's a serious problem. Because you don't need their dictionary to define who you are. Are you supposed to tell me, tell us in the diaspora, inform us, but since we don't have no education, no facilities in the diaspora, we don't have no schooling, we don't have no college, we don't have no universities, yeah, of our own. We are 10 others, yeah? We don't know that. And since we're not in the same space, reasoning and expressing and learning and advancing with each other, this is why we're being used like a football and a basketball, any kind of ball. See, the rites of passage as an African should have been taught to us, most importantly to us, children of the slaves. Manhood journey and a journey of life from an African point of view and perspective, and its morality and its courtesies should have been taught to us by our African brothers and sisters, family, on the continent. And that's what's lacking, that's what's missing. That has been missing. Listen, Melika Shabazz. Listen, Melika Shabazz. And we're going to talk on Thursday about what Islam, Al-Islam, offers human beings. Because the perception some of you have in relation to Islam, Al-Islam, is somewhat warped. Al-Islam is not a sit down, waiting in and all of that. It's a liberty. At this time, it's a way of life. But first, the card that needs to be attained is about our duties. And those of us who weren't born within a family structure, as in a Muslim family, and we are coming back home, as it were, we have to drop whatever it is that we were doing or participating within and realign ourselves morally and realign our spirituality. Yes, that's a learning curve between our nature and God's guidance in Al-Quran. And that brings us to a place we call balance. The human nature, the nature of us as human beings become balanced. So we understand or overstand, or we're able to recognize the true balance of what is right, what is wrong, and live it. Not just talk it. It's not a talk shop. It's about living it. It's about incorporating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rules, as you say, your oath, your covenant, your commandments, your tenets, and live. That's Al-Islam. Al-Islam is not nothing about, that's on Thursday. So you know something about jihad, the striving. Every day we are alive, we're in a struggle, human beings, as nature is, as animals are, to survive. Not to exist, to survive. Because once we're alive, we have to survive. We have to do things. And we have to be able to avoid wrongs. We have to be accountable. We have to accept responsibilities. It's a serious thing. It's not just sit down and go get yourself brush up on Sunday through the grace of a pastor or some person. And with Muslims, it's not Friday and just get triggered up. No. Friday is our community. Our community. Not showing its strength, but in a sense you can say that. But if we say that now, that come like we're ready to take control of the country or something. So it's our community. And our community duties. Our duties to each other. I was going to say towards one another. Same thing. With the reflection of what the Prophet, peace and blessing upon him, has and were exercising in at that time. And we do that in this time. Yes. Taking care of each other to the best of all of our abilities, and recognizing the building and the developments for tomorrow's tomorrow, which is for our wives and our children. Oh yes, serious things. Not just sitting there talking about pie in the sky. We don't deal with that. We do not. We do not. And plus we don't sit down and ostracize other people. Life is too valuable and too important. You understand? And the teachings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, is not the frivolous foolishness. You understand? All these innuendos that people put out there, this is man and our illusions and no. I have no time for that. It's Allah we work with, and what Allah sponsor give us, and wants for us, is what we repeat, learn, and apply. The whole thing about anything called faith, religion, is about the application. You know what I mean? It's about the application. If it's like a song, gosh man, you get the number one, and then you need, you know what I mean, somebody look for another hit. Al-Quran is the hit of all hits. We don't need to replenish it. We need to abide by, adhere to. And that's to the best of our abilities. Simple. So those people who deal with rage and anger and so forth, ask yourself, and those people who follow people who fall into those conundrums, and then them finish up grieving because this person have done some despicable things over this and this over this and so forth. You have to look into it. You have to look into it. So then you have to take this thing them called Bible, Biblos, and question it and find out who is guiding whom. Not who wrote it so much. Who's guiding whom? Not even who's inspiring whom. Who's guiding whom? Right? And because you have some smart guys out there now, them say, God is not the author of confusion. Now, why would they tutors them, teach them that, or give them, illustrate that to them? Because them know say that the things them that they utter and them find inside there, beside the pornography and everything else, that cannot be coming from God. So they want them to be dismissive of the things that their common sense, their sensibility would be looking at as appalling. So instead of they now use their own sensibility, pass to them, and whoever's instructed to pass to them, jump the ship quick and then go up there and tell them, say that God is not the author of confusion. So then the question to be asked is, why is it there then? Why is all these vulgarities and different things there? Why the fact of racism and everything is there? Why all of these things are there? And then you're trying to justify something for God. So that means that God never write that something. God never transmit that something. Because it shouldn't need no justification. You can analyze, but if your soul, which it belongs to God, and it's God's words, it's God's instruction, then your soul amplifies that which is. It cannot do anything else. It will divorce and dismiss and discredit what is wrong. And that's not vocally done. That's spiritually done by God himself, by God's self to those human beings that is being transmitted to. Do you understand that part there? It's like a needle on top of a record. It's like the eye on top of the CD. Huh? It has to work in kind. If it's from God, the soul will determine. But since it isn't, evil comes out. Wrongdoings come out. So you have a problem, and then you try to associate your problems with others, and especially Muslims. And then, because you can't undress our women, you use a thing to say that they're not free. And you try to get your feminist ideologies and different things to look and analyze to say, well, the woman is in what, medieval times and so forth. But it's God who says so, you know. And no way. It's God said for them and society to be so balanced and moral with ethical principles for the man to control his loin and control his lustful appetite. So for that to happen, it's for the balance between male and female to accompany each other, complement each other. So there's no man that would tell me that he see a woman and he doesn't have admiration. There's no man that would tell me him see a woman and see her curves and him not admiring it. He's a liar. Lied. So the Creator knows. Now society be very confused and mischievous with this imbalance and this kind of cinema, big screen taking place on a day-by-day, second-by-second basis. Animals don't behave like that. So we who are example and we're given the authority to name things and to raise things and to get the benefit out of the creation itself, starting with ourselves and then plenishing it off with the earth, it'd be so terrible. Can't you think? Don't wait for someone else to say that them have logic and philosophies and ideologies because they're using words as in science and educational terminologies. Where do they get it? There's a limit to man's ignorance. So we are going because social perceptions. And then we have some people, them, even in our camp, as in African peoples, black people, male and female, human beings, that are opportunists. All these definitions is out there. But the behaviors, we have people them who engage with the media. They're part and parcel of whether it's liberals or conservatives. They're in it. They make a living and they become popular. They're not all mixed race families, as in African and white. They're not all mixed race as in children who are born between an African and a white again. They're just people who feel so that they better serve over there than in an African scene. And they will tell the people who they're working for, the people they're impressing, whether it's their husband or wife's family, and know that circle of people or that employers and so forth, how much they understand and recognize and how much they do not agree with and have never and found these things very disturbing and so forth. So they journey through life, telling stories, and then become journalists and so forth and script writers for variant media platforms. But when them see a spotlight, something that they can work with, jump on, them come and do it. So like there's a couple people out there, I use my brethren as opportunities. And them I try make people understand that they're speaking now from their hearts. I mean, if I was to speak to them, have that chance, I would say, wait. So rest of the time then, where were you speaking from? Not about this particular situation, but were you speaking from what? Your backside before? And now you say you speak from your heart? They're using these terminologies and changing their definitions, changing their use of the English vocabulary in such a sensitive manner as to give us, the listeners, as in black people, the sense of feeling that somehow they're being transformed. A lie. A lie. Just opportunists. Is what we call Rufuses. Strictly roast breadfruit. People is to be disregarded totally. Another time for that. The litmus test, them set it and them set their own standards. And all you have to do is remember them. Remember them. Because to say that we're accepting people like that, those people have to go and make a public apology to us or to whoever to say, listen, I've been transformed. Like Paul, I was walking on the road of Damascus or New York or California or Atlanta or and such happened to me. Read what I just said about Paul, and you see that what people them assume and add to the something is what make this New Testament very, very fictitious and confusing. But the people them who want something to be said and understood, that's why they did it. So these people need to say, listen here, I'm taking the stance to say, I really apologize for my behavior and the words that I was uttering the last 15 or 20 years of my life. I too have to accept that I'm as big as Bob Marley. I'm coming out to the CM stock, and I'm deeply I'm saddened, and I heartedly apologize for my ignorance. Yes, but they don't do that. Them just jump on the thing and go get important, and next thing you know, the next 3 months, the next quarter, them they upon every news cast in the States, CNN, Fox, NBC, CNBC, and it goes on. And then the tabloids. But as far as some of us that have sense, but when I use our sensibility, where things say, yo, you know what? Them words, they sound good enough. So what does God say? That you have those of us human beings who can convince the very elect. They would convince the scholars and the highly regarded religious-minded peoples. They will convince them that their philosophy, their theory, their sensitive nature is right and exact. That's the way they speak also. So I don't have no time for that. No time for that. Seriously. I'm not better than the most or anyone else. But an opportunist, oh gosh, man. You know? So our prophet, peace and blessing upon him, had people around him like that. But it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the angel Gabriel alayhi salam that point them out to us. Point them out to us, as in pointing them out to the prophet, so we would understand, and then we got the definitions from that, as in terms of the behaviors of what that is, how that is, and how it was played out. And deeply they're called hypocrites. Oh yes. So across the Western world, we have people who dress like Saudis. Yes. And things happen. And people them shout out Muslims, like every Indian is a Muslim or Hindu or a Sikh. No, not no so. It's not every black man that's a Christian or Muslim or whatever. It's not every human, not every Chinese or looking person is a Chinese. No, they're Indonesians, they're Vietnamese, they're Japanese, they're Indonesians. Hey, listen here. And even Africans, I tell you, you not see Africans. You don't really see Africans. You just see some black people and say Africans. You understand? Everything in this creation, we all have a resemblance of one another. Huh? And a cultural definition of one another. If you never know that you now live in this earth, you read somebody's book and they give their opinion and keep you right here in London or the United Kingdom or boxed up some part of Europe. Yeah? And now I'm saying that all the decadence and this immoral sexual behaviors are not African, that you know. These are learned behaviors, man, from other than us. You understand? Seriously. And I would love to feel that way, inclined. You understand? But let that be. So, social perceptions and opportunities will come back here, God willing. And that. Now, self-esteem and mental abuse. Self-esteem is tremendous. But in everything you have arrogance. You have arrogance. And also you have people have grief and experiences. So self-esteem is not something to put in a box and then pull it out like this rabbit and this musician thing. No. A better definition needs to be looked at in relation to that. Because mental seduction is a serious problem, you know, among all kind of people. Seriously. Because mental seduction brings about mental abuse, rage and anger. Hey, then a person now suffers some form of grief when them realize what has taken place. Not what just took place, what has been taking place, because someone has defined it for them. And now the grief that put them into this mental seduction or this mental illusion, now they're in a big problem. True to the gravity of the situation, and now to unlock that person, now you need self-esteem. You need to attach, you need to find that person esteem. And maybe that's the only thing that them can recall if somebody in their family can tell us, give us some background information. And that's what you work on, to bring that person back to what we would call normality. From feeling mentally abused. From being seduced. Mental seduction. And this happens to the best of people and the strongest of people. It happens to everybody because they're being guided by other people. And you don't know it until you start feeling pain or become dismissive of your social surroundings. And we have a lot of that, a lot of problems in society as black people in a Britain, African Caribbean people in a Britain. Them call it mental health, but it comes from mental seduction, mental abuse. Yes, everything. And the royal household were speaking, and the media, about that for a year. But it wasn't reflective on the country. It was reflective on the middle class set of people. And so much people gravitate to it. But then you visit the mental hospice in and around your communities, and you walk the street and you see us. And those that we do not see, that are locked up in care, mental care services. And then there are those who have not been sorted, been treated, or their families have not recognized the symptoms. Some serious things, you know. I'm saying that because them use these tactics in society, and you have some people them coming from our walks of life and behave certain ways, and then the police them charge. You hear people them talk about them section, them this and that and the other, and they don't say mental health, but them base their action on religious brainwashing, trying to stigmatize al-Islam in a that. And it's not true. It's definitely not true. But it's a serious tool. And a lot of civil servants and a lot of health workers knows how to apply that. And even police services knows how to apply it. And if they don't know individually, they will grab persons and carry them into that particular section. And then in a matter of months, that person is being derailed, or persons. They will lack an understanding of even who they are. And this is manipulation, mental manipulation. This is the world that we're living within. So it's not religion. It's not religious brainwashing. There's a bigger system out there. And now these European peoples are interfering with us now and want to tell us how to think and what threshold we can cross and not cross. And we need to understand definition. We need to re-educate and educate ourselves and stop playing games. So we have to say guidance. Where's my Muslim sisters? So we have to say guidance. Oh, yes. On Friday, our show was running through wonderful. But YouTube, them know we know for a long time, you know. And we are there with promoters and producers and distributors. Our music, source and selection come from authorized individuals. And then a bootleg and a falsifies anything. That's number one. So those people who have been in tuning into us and checking our shows out, and you know our numbers, our attention is gone up. Give thanks for that. But I had to I didn't want to have the problem where we have been suspended or blocked for 90 days and all kind of something like that. So my mindset told me, my intelligence told me, my intellectual scruples told me the best thing to do is push the button private from public and wait to hear what YouTube is going to say, because them stopped the show. The show wasn't finished. So one time I think say it was that we are run so much tunes, there were some words that I heard in two music that me say, yo, that's gonna make them people, them ears and eye pop up. But I got a good email and so on, and it was, I don't know what automated machine them have. I don't know what kind of technology them have, but them just copyright the whole thing. So I don't know how that work. And then before the show was finishing, them just a yellow thing come across my screen, and then the transmission was finished by YouTube, not by us, for them server. And during the night, me say, yo, you know what, yes, I better do this. So I did that. And it is, I think, yesterday, I pressed through to the receiving of the email from them. I pressed, because all the producer them and company, them just say, go on, right? That's probably what they said to them. Because they didn't pick out one tune, it's just like the whole set. So I press on the button again, turn it from public to private, and then from private back to public. So that took several hours, and it come back up. It's gone out again. So if you see that, it's not we are play games with people are trying to be smart and everything. It's just trying to stay within the rules of the provider, which happen to be YouTube. You see? So I say again, give thanks for your participation, give thanks for your viewership and everything. And just know say that Friday, the 11th for the 11th, is up there. Principal did try a few things, him add something that is, him add some different type of music in the something, yeah? So maybe that's what got YouTube. Me don't know. The persons them who, I don't know what happened, but it was, it pricked me because I never expect it. You understand? Not what YouTube did. I never expect, was it about seven rhythms and everything. You know what I mean? Them type of bedroom Casio sounds them I'm not into. But it got me. You know what I mean? It pricked me up and saying like, wow. You know what I mean? I want to say, where the hell them thing they come from? But it's something, yeah? It's an integrational thing. As a selector, him there work with. You know what I mean? But next time him need to warn me, cause if I tell you, serious thing. So that could all be the thing that got you, whoever is on YouTube, cause some people out there love our show, I tell you. Hey, that same YouTube people, them love it. Cause them know say we are we do the thing different. And some of them want to know where the backside we get them rhythms them from. We know that, man. And we don't want to swell it. Just be courteous to us. You understand? Because we're not doing nothing different. It's just that we're not part of the running that, we're not part of that old syndicate. We do what we want to do and how we want to do it. You understand? If we are trend setters, we set trend. We're not pacemaker because we not run and then someone come and win. Nah. In the true sense of the word, we are the pacemakers. We see ourselves as pacemakers. We set standards, but we not set standard based on some other people. Them. We just do what we do, and we're comfortable. We're comfortable and confident in what we do. You understand? So Friday, I think say that was one of him experiments. Me no know. You understand? I know say it pricked me up. And if you see my face looking at him, you would understand. Because me like music, right? But you see them little something there. And the lyrics them inside of the something was all right. You know what I mean? It was all right. But the beats, nah. But still, when me listen to all the thing, we listen to it today online 3 times. I may say, go on, man. It's all right. That's what me say. But me I think out of the box that teenagers and everybody, because the message overall, the young people, them, yeah. The overall message inside that section there on Sunday, on Friday, yeah. You know, even though there was like me say 7 beats that I couldn't work with, I would not work with, cause and the music, you see. But the lyrical content and the message, yes, man, you can't miss it. So when Prince will do him to you can't miss it, you know. You can't miss the message. May I tell you, we are not foolish. It's just that him prick my ears them on Friday, but YouTube got pricked. That's what I try to say. Some of YouTube love him, love the selection, right? So like right now them in it, you know. So like they just choreograph the thing, and wherever them just go, I them carry principle with them. So at them we must put copyright on. You understand? Cause this selector over SR are the real thing. Not them with other people, them man. Them can pluck 1 or 2 records and make a whole heap of nice about who the hell they are and everything. And that them do. They just run up the mouth. So we are going. Gone. Guidance. God willing, Thursday, reflection. We're coming back with Dr. Amos. Yes, we're coming back with him. We're coming back with Dr. Wilson. We're coming back with the advent, the early days of Al-Islam, of Al-Istaghfirullah, the early days of Elijah Muhammad, the early days, yeah, where he was farming the black man and the black woman, transforming and bringing a dignity into the black man, into the black family, into the black people, them. Serious thing, yeah? And then people understand now, from that time to this time, what is actually evolved. Seriously, man. This is the thing that education and information is supposed to do. You're not supposed to just excite you and you're just gone, you know. It's supposed to have a reflectiveness. It's supposed to be able to assess and evaluate progression. If you can't do that in anything, then you have to take your child to another place, another school, and even yourself move somewhere else. But we just did it because of personality and not go on. And you're not learning, you're not advancing, and you cannot be mentally and physically independent within yourself and feel good, not just emotionally, you know. You understand? There's something missing. That means you never really went to school. And when you did go to school, you never tried to learn nothing at school. And not learning from the teacher, you know, understand what school is about. And your parents perhaps never knew what education, learning, or school is about. It's there to transmit something. And if them find that you're unreceptive, then there's a problem. It's a problem. Maybe the school transmitters are not working correctly, which is the teachers. Maybe they're not really grabbing the attention at all. So it's a serious problem. So we want people to understand that we not bash the Nation of Islam, you know. We are bash what it stands for after. And we are bash when the transmission, when the transition happened. There were those who turn around and go back. And then try to reinvent what you were. And how can they do that? You're not there. They're coming with this personality transformation and dreams and creating illusions as they go along. Because they want to stay within that time frame, which is like the movie them have over in this country called The Prisoner. You're trapped. Can't come out. And every time the people them seem to go asleep, you try to wake them up and tell them about America and America. It's not God of America we work with. It's ourselves we work with. And all these 60-something years to write it down our state. And everything that was there before is still there now. So don't come think so that some advancement happened. So the last thing that was talked about is a spaceship, UFO. You're joking. The people that make some big film with something hovering above the White House or someplace. Hey, listen here. Fiction, imagination. A foolishness. Huh? You understand? If that be the case to write it, I am not go up there. Eh? Let's leave the planet. Leave Earth, man. And even me, carry me with you. Stone. It's just like the other one talk about this place called Shambhala. Him there prison, and all these people that him supposed to know that are aliens on this earth, and the ones that live in the ocean and everything else, and him know the Shambhala and so forth. He knows their names. Or him not call them and make them just transport him out to the black side prison. Come on, man. These mythologies is too much, man. You understand? And you don't need degree, you know. You don't even need to go to school to have that kind of sensibility. You just stay there with your mama. And you're cool. And our parents, our mothers are the first teacher and the best teacher. Guidance. Burn.
Inside of me, the fire is burning, burning inside. Your love is pleasing, so satisfying. Tell me you love me, and don't you tell no lie. Feeling I'm down, I've got to know. Let's settle down and talk it over now. Bring me your sleep, let us smoke myself to ash. Because it is time, we've got to face the fire. Fire is burning, burning inside of me. The fire is burning, burning inside, yeah. Your love is pleasing, so satisfying. And tell me you love me, don't you tell no lie. Ooh, yeah. Your love, your love, your love, your love. The fire is burning,